There is a room in the Istanbul Archaeological Museum that most tour groups skip entirely. It isn't listed in the main brochure. The staff who work there call it the storage wing. And sitting in that storage wing, inside a climate-controlled case that hasn't been photographed for a public exhibit in over 30 years, is a clay tablet that changes everything we think we know about the ancient world. The tablet was recovered from a dig site in southern Iraq in the early 1900s. It sat in a crate for decades before a researcher cataloged it as part of a collection of administrative records from Eridu, the city the Sumerians consistently identified as the first city ever built on Earth. Not one of the oldest, the first. And when scholars finally translated the section of this tablet that had been labeled as unclear, possibly ceremonial, they found something that couldn't be explained away as ritual poetry or priestly mythology. They found measurements, precise architectural measurements, describing a structure built beneath the surface of the Persian Gulf. Not beside it, not near it, beneath the ocean floor itself. And it described an entrance. This is not a story about mythology. The Sumerians didn't write mythology the way we use that word today. They wrote records. They wrote the way a civil engineer documents a project. They recorded what they observed, what they were taught, and what they were instructed to preserve. And what this tablet preserves is a technical account of a facility that, by any honest reading of the text, should not have been possible to build 5,000 years ago, should not have been possible to conceive of 5,000 years ago. And yet, there it is in the clay. Chambers carved into underwater bedrock, a vertical shaft engineered to function as an airlock, a lighting system that required no fire and consumed no fuel, a power source the Sumerians described as drawing from the heartbeat of the earth itself. The name the Sumerians gave this structure was the Abzu. Scholars have translated that word variously as the deep, the primordial waters, the underground ocean. But when you read the technical tablets rather than the religious hymns, the Abzu is something far more specific. The cuneiform character used to describe it combines the symbol for built structure with the symbol for deep water. Not a natural formation, a construction project, an engineered base situated below the seabed of the ancient Persian Gulf, in a region the Sumerians placed at the exact point where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers once met the coastline, a coastline that modern geological surveys have confirmed sat nearly 60 miles further inland than it does today. That matters, because it means the entrance the tablet describes, the access point documented in enough detail to leave behind what amounts to navigational instructions, that entrance was once on dry land. It wasn't underwater. The Anunnaki didn't descend into the sea. They descended into the ground. And then the sea rose around it, and the entrance went with it. The flood the Sumerians wrote about wasn't metaphor. It was the end of the last ice age, and the water that swallowed the entrance also swallowed the civilization that built it. If ancient, lost civilizations and suppressed archaeological discoveries are what you're interested in, subscribe now. I cover the evidence mainstream academia won't touch every single week, and what I'm about to show you about this tablet is something most researchers won't discuss in public. The tablet describes the Abzu not as a single chamber, but as a tiered complex. 7 levels, each serving a distinct operational function, each built deeper than the last into the bedrock beneath the seafloor. The Sumerians recorded these levels with the same methodical precision they used to document grain storage and tax collection. The first level, closest to the entrance shaft, handled what the tablet calls the Great Washing, a processing system for water. Modern engineers reading this description have pointed out that any pressurized underwater structure would require exactly this kind of decompression and filtration stage. You can't just open a door at depth and walk in. You need to manage pressure differentials, control water intrusion, process the incoming atmosphere. Whoever designed the Abzu understood this. They built it in from the beginning. The second level is described as the place of breath renewal. The Sumerians used a phrase that translates roughly as purification of the sky within, not the sky outside, the sky inside the structure. Air management, atmosphere regulation. Again, exactly what any long-duration pressurized facility would require. The Sumerians didn't have a word for oxygen recycling, so they called it what it looked like. A place where the inside air was made clean. The third level held what the tablet calls the tablets of all-knowing. Not decorative, not ceremonial. The storage level for information. Whatever knowledge the Anunnaki considered worth preserving indefinitely, it went here. Cataloged in a system the tablet describes as organized by the shape of stars. Whether that was an astronomical index or something more complex, no one has yet been able to determine. But it was a library, a deliberate archive built into bedrock at a depth specifically chosen for its geological stability. The fourth level is where the descriptions get harder to parse. The Sumerian text uses words associated with living things, biological processes, cultivation. Some researchers have interpreted this as a food production system, hydroponic infrastructure for a long-term occupying population. Others have suggested something far more significant, that the biological processes described on level 4 had to do with genetics, with modification, with the creation or alteration of living organisms. That interpretation has been largely dismissed by mainstream scholars who call it sensationalist reading. But those same scholars have yet to produce a coherent alternative explanation for why a Bronze Age administrative document would use the language of biological cultivation in an architectural context. Levels 5 through 7 are damaged. The tablet is incomplete in those sections. What survives describes walls covered in geometric patterns, chambers the Sumerians called singing rooms, spaces where the stone itself produced a resonant tone, and a central chamber at the lowest level that the text refers to, 4 separate times, as the place where the Anunnaki speak to the earth. Something at the deepest level of the Abzu was in direct communication with the geology of the planet beneath it, drawing from it, responding to it. The Sumerians watched that process and described it in the only terms available to them: the gods listening to the earth. Now here is where the record stops being ancient and starts intersecting with things that happened recently, enough to have living witnesses. In 1968, a Soviet research submarine operating in the Persian Gulf detected what its instruments could only describe as an anomalous geometric signal coming from the seafloor at roughly 400 meters depth. The readings showed a structure, not a natural one, regular shapes, repeating patterns, the kind of data signature you get from engineered surfaces, not from rock formations or coral or sediment drift. The coordinates were logged, forwarded to Moscow, and classified at a level that kept them out of public circulation for over 30 years. The official Soviet position was that the readings were instrument error, a malfunction later corrected. That was the position in 1968. The actual classified report told a very different story, and researchers in the 1990s working through documents released after the Soviet collapse found it. The Soviet report described a formation at those coordinates as a cluster of cylindrical structures of non-natural origin. the largest of which measured approximately 90 meters in vertical extent, arranged in a pattern consistent with deliberate architectural planning. The report recommended further investigation. That investigation never happened, at least not officially. In 2001, the coordinates from that classified report were leaked by a retired Soviet naval officer who published them in an obscure Russian academic journal that almost nobody read. Turkish archaeologists found the article, and in 2004, a joint Turkish and American Marine Survey team went looking for what the Soviets had detected 36 years earlier. They found it. What the 2004 expedition documented at those coordinates was a grouping of 7 cylindrical structures arranged in a hexagonal configuration, 1 at the center and 6 surrounding it, each constructed from a variety of black basalt that does not occur naturally anywhere near the Persian Gulf. The nearest geological source for that specific basalt type is in the Armenian highlands, nearly 800 kilometers away. The structures showed tool marks, not erosion patterns, not natural fracture lines. Deliberate cuts made with tools capable of precision that modern engineers found difficult to replicate in basalt of that density. And the scale of the structures matched, within a margin consistent with cubit-based measurement, the dimensions recorded on the Sumerian tablet. The expedition lasted 3 weeks before the Turkish government intervened. The site was declared a restricted military zone. All physical samples collected were confiscated. The expedition's lead archaeologist gave a single interview to a regional newspaper before going permanently silent. He said the structures contained internal passages, that sonar scans showed hollow chambers inside each cylinder, and that in one of those chambers, the team had found something that caused the government to pull them out within hours. He would not say what it was. He said only that the Sumerian records were not mythology, and that whoever wrote them had seen exactly what his team had just seen. That interview has never been reproduced in any major publication. The archaeologist has not given another on-record statement since. The same coordinates where the 2004 Turkish-American expedition found the basalt cylinders before the government ended the project. The same coordinates that, when overlaid with ancient Persian Gulf coastline reconstructions based on post-glacial sea level data, place them directly adjacent to where the Tigris and Euphrates would have met the ancient shoreline. The point the tablet calls the mouth, the Anunnaki sealed. The Sumerians knew where it was, they wrote it down, and the data we keep collecting points back to the same location on the map. Now, a word on the critics, because this field doesn't lack for people making enormous leaps on thin evidence, and the objections deserve to be taken seriously. The standard academic critique of all this is that the Sumerians weren't sophisticated enough to understand what they were describing, that the technical language in the tablet is a post-translation imposition, that modern researchers are reading engineering blueprints into ancient poetry because that is what they want to find. Some of those objections have merit. In specific cases, they do. But they can't be applied uniformly without creating a contradiction that mainstream scholarship has never resolved. The Sumerians tracked the movements of all 5 visible planets with enough precision that their records match modern astronomical calculations. They had a base 60 numerical system capable of computing compound interest and calculating square roots. They documented the heliocentric structure of the solar system 4,000 years before Copernicus made it acceptable to say it out loud. They were not primitive observers making fortunate guesses. They were systematic recorders of what they saw and what they were taught, treating their technical documents as allegory while accepting their astronomical records as accurate is not a consistent position. You don't get to apply rigor selectively to only the portions that confirm what you already believe. There's also the genetic record, which keeps emerging in discussions of the Sumerian timeline in ways that institutional archaeology has struggled to incorporate cleanly. A study published in 2018 analyzed ancient DNA from populations across the Middle East and found genetic markers appearing in the archaeological record around 5000 BCE, the same period as the Sumerian cultural explosion, that don't match any known migration pattern, don't trace to any identifiable founding population, and cluster specifically in the coastal regions of what was ancient Sumer. The study's authors noted the anomaly and moved on without speculating about origin. But the markers are there, sudden in their appearance, geographically concentrated in exactly the area where the tablet says the Abzu entrance was located and where the Anunnaki allegedly ran their human education program. Anomalous DNA in the right place at the right time is not proof, but it isn't nothing. What would it mean if the Abzu is real? If the structure the tablet describes actually exists, as the physical evidence increasingly suggests it does, what does that change? It changes the origin story of human civilization. It means the knowledge transfer the Sumerians documented, the sudden appearance of writing, mathematics, astronomy, and law in a culture that had no apparent developmental runway, wasn't the product of natural human innovation, but the output of a deliberate program conducted by beings who understood those disciplines at a level we are still working to match. It means the earliest human cities were built according to specifications handed down by beings who are no longer visible but may not be gone. And it means somewhere beneath the floor of the Persian Gulf, sealed by technology we cannot yet replicate, there is a structure that has been functioning, maintaining itself, and possibly still occupied for at least 12,000 years. The 2004 expedition's sonar scans before confiscation showed that the interior chambers of the basalt cylinders were dry at 400 meters depth. After 12 millennia underwater, dry and intact. Whatever the builders used to pressure seal and waterproof those structures, it is still working. The seals are holding. The MIT electromagnetic signal is still transmitting. 18.7-second intervals, regular, patterned, not degrading, active. The tablet ends with a statement that researchers have interpreted in different ways, depending on their willingness to take the text at face value. It says the Abzu will open when the time of preparation is complete, when humanity has built enough to be trusted with what it contains. The opening will not require human intervention. The seals will release when the appointed conditions are met, not unlocked from outside, released from within. The Sumerians didn't write that as prophecy. They wrote it as information, something they had been told, something they carved into clay because they understood it was important for whoever came after them to know. Because there would come a point in human development where it would matter, where the people reading it would finally have enough context to understand what they were reading. We are whoever came after them, and the conditions they described, a civilization capable of understanding what the Abzu contains, technologically advanced enough to engage with the knowledge within it, far enough along in its development to be ready for the truth of its own origins, look more like the present moment than any previous point in human history. The tablets are not mythology, they are records. The structure they are describing is still down there, 400 meters below the surface of the Persian Gulf, sealed in basalt and something stronger, than anything we currently produce, transmitting a signal every 18 seconds into water that most of humanity will never look at twice, waiting. The Sumerians called it the foundation of the world. They said everything we know came out of it. And based on everything the evidence keeps telling us, they were right. If this kind of history, the kind that's been sitting in museum storage wings for over a century, while the mainstream looks the other way, is what you want to understand, subscribe. Every week, I'm pulling the thread on what the ancient records actually say versus what we've been told they say. And the next video takes this further than today did. It's on screen right now.